Now, the media is playing an important role in the protests, but many protesters in Iran say they're facing government suppression, and popular websites such as Facebook are being blocked along with mobile phone messaging services. Robin Hamman is an expert in new media in London, and he joins us now. Thank you very much for joining us. We've seen that there have been strong media restrictions in the aftermath of this particular election on TV, on internet, and we've seen that Iranians, particularly young Iranians, have circumvented a lot of these restrictions and got their message out. How successful has it been, not only in Iran, as we see now, but in other parts of the world, to use new media to mobilize great masses of people?
Sure. Ask any teenager in most countries in the Middle East how to get around internet censorship, and they can tell you 5 or 6 different ways to do it. So it's no surprise that we're still getting tweets, messages, blog posts, photographs being posted from inside the protest areas of Tehran and elsewhere in Iran, and they're reaching us here in the West. What's really interesting about that is the way that people in the West and in other countries are able to have direct access to people on the ground. So they bypass the traditional channels of the media and go straight to people on the ground who are eyewitnessing events. Now, a lot of the hype that goes with things like this says, you know, people on the ground are organizing these protests using Twitter and Facebook and MySpace. To some extent, that's probably true, but I think the big story really is that people are able to, in an unmediated way, get their story out to a global audience from the ground. They can show people exactly what's happening, just as in the London G20 protests, people were streaming live videos, sending tweets, posting photographs to Facebook. You know, we're going to see this more and more in developing countries, and indeed in the Middle East as well.
Now, isn't there another side to this? Because we know in a place like Iran, it's a small, privileged urban sector of society that has access to this level of technology. So isn't there a danger that the Facebook or YouTube cell phone videos or even the tweets can in some way give a skewed impression to the world at times of what's actually going on?
Sure, absolutely, and I think that is something that we have to keep in mind. Also, a lot of times you don't know who's actually sending those tweets or posting those blog posts. So you should always pay attention to, you know, look into the history of the person who's posting. See if you can see them posting about life in Iran and their friends and the things that they're doing and seeing in Iran weeks ago or months ago. Start to create your own picture of who that person is and whether or not you can trust them. Just as people know that they can trust you because they watch you every evening and they know the brand, start to understand, you know, who these people are, what their message is, and whether or not you can trust them. And of course, try and look for a wide variety of sources. And I think you make a very valid point. If you only pay attention to what people are saying online, you're only looking at what a very small percentage of the population and a particular demographic are saying. You're absolutely correct in pointing that out.
And if I were in the government of any government propaganda department, I'd be thinking, if you can't beat them, join them. So why don't we use Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube grainy cell phone videos and create our own reality? What about that? Have governments sort of followed suit?
I think they probably have more than we already know. There are some examples of politicians and indeed candidates in America or the UK using Twitter and Facebook to gather support. Now that is, you know, perfectly legal, legitimate reasons. Whether or not governments have used it in, you know, underhanded ways to undermine opposition groups, for example, I don't know specifically. I do know that in some countries that are seen to have less than open regimes. For example, in Kazakhstan, the government is blogging using one of the main blogging tools that's used by the opposition, LiveJournal. So yes, I think that, you know, actually they use mail.ru as well, which is another platform there. But I think you're right. I think that, you know, governments, politicians, the military are also going to be using these services to tell their side of the story, to spread propaganda, but also potentially to get into those networks of people, figure out who they are, and see if they can try to stop them or change their messages.
Robin Hamman, it really is a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.